gates have just closed, and they will not open again for a year. It is the year 1215, somewhere in medieval Europe, and an enemy army has appeared on the horizon. Thousands of men, siege engines dragged by oxen, banners, wagons, and behind them the certainty of a long and terrible ordeal. Inside the castle walls are perhaps a few hundred souls, the lord's garrison of knights and crossbowmen, the servants, the craftsmen, and the villagers who fled inside with their animals when the alarm bell rang. From this moment, the castle is no longer a home. It is a sealed world, a stone island, cut off from everything. No food will come in. No one will leave. Every barrel of grain, every drop of water in the well, every arrow, every man and woman inside these walls is now part of a single brutal equation. Can they outlast the army outside? Because here is the truth the movies never tell you. Most sieges were not decided by ladders and heroic assaults. They were decided by hunger, by thirst, by disease, and by time. A siege was a competition in suffering, a slow strangulation in which the attackers tried to starve the defenders out before their own army rotted away in its camps. Today, we are going inside the walls for the whole ordeal, from the first day of the blockade to the desperate final weeks, to discover exactly how people survived and sometimes did not survive. A year sealed inside a medieval castle. The enemy is pitching their tents. The gates are barred. Let us begin. Using advanced AI trained on the chronicles of medieval sieges, the archaeology of castles and siege works, the household and garrison records that survive from the great fortresses, and the studies of historians who have reconstructed siege warfare in detail, we have rebuilt the experience of the besieged. And it begins, as every siege begins, with arithmetic. The moment the gates close, the castle's fate is largely decided by what is already inside, and the wise castellan has spent years preparing for this day. A castle expecting trouble is provisioned like a ship for a long voyage. Deep in its cellars and undercrofts are the stores, grain above all, wheat, barley and oats by the ton, because bread and pottage will keep everyone alive, salted and smoked meat and fish in barrels, cheese, dried peas and beans, salt itself, precious for preservation, wine and ale, and the malt to brew more. Live animals are driven inside. Pigs, chickens, cattle, a walking larder that will be slaughtered in careful order as the months pass, the cattle first, since they eat the most. Firewood is stacked in mountains for cooking and for the coming winter. Hay is packed into every loft for the horses, and the horses themselves are a hard calculation. The knights need them if there is ever to be a sally or an escape, but each one eats what would feed many people, and late in a siege, the chronicles tell us frankly, the garrison eats the horses. And more important than all the food is the water. A castle without a secure water supply is a castle that will fall, and everyone knows it. The great fortresses are built over deep wells cut down through solid rock, some of them astonishing feats sunk dozens of meters to reach the water table, or over vast cisterns that catch and store rainwater from the roofs. The well is the castle's true heart, guarded and maintained like a holy relic, because thirst kills faster than hunger, and a poisoned or failed well ends everything within days. On day one, the castellan takes inventory of all of it, counts every mouth, and sets the rations. From this day forward, everyone inside, from the lord's family to the lowest kitchen boy, lives by the arithmetic of the stores. So much bread a day, so much ale, and the numbers written in the steward's book are, quite literally, the number of days the castle can survive. Outside the walls, the enemy is building their own world, and understanding it explains everything about the year ahead. The besieging army surrounds the castle and seals it. Earthwork lines, palisades, guarded roads, so that no food, messengers or reinforcements can slip in. Then they settle down to their real weapons, which are patience and machinery. Up go the siege engines, mangonels, and, in this age, the great trebuchets, counterweight machines that can hurl stones of enormous weight against the walls and over them, day after day, smashing roofs, cracking battlements, and grinding away at the defenders' nerves. The attackers name their greatest machines like pets, and the defenders learn the rhythm of them, the creak, the thump of the counterweight, the whistle of the stone, the crash. The bombardment is not only stone. Chronicles record the besiegers throwing firepots, and sometimes worse, the rotting carcasses of animals hurled over the walls to spread stench and sickness among the besieged, an early and deliberate form of biological warfare. And below the ground, the most feared weapon of all, the mine. Teams of miners, often professionals brought specially, dig tunnels from behind the siege lines toward the walls, aiming to burrow beneath a tower's foundations. There they hollow out a chamber, prop the masonry above on timber posts, pack the chamber with brushwood and fat, and set it alight. When the props burn through, the ground gives way and the tower above cracks, slumps, and comes down in an avalanche of stone. Entire fortresses considered impregnable have been brought down this way. The defender's answer is the counter-mine. Listeners crouch in the cellars with bowls of water on the floor, watching for the telltale trembling rings that betray digging below. And then the garrison digs its own tunnel to break into the enemy's, and men fight with knives and short blades in the wet, black, airless dark under the walls, the most nightmarish combat of the entire medieval world. This is the siege, not one battle, but a slow, grinding duel of machines above ground and men beneath it, while hunger does the real work. Inside the walls, the first months settle into a strange, tense routine, and daily life becomes a discipline of survival. The garrison stands watches around the clock, rotating through the towers and wall walks, eyes on the enemy camp, crossbows ready. Every man knows his post for an assault. The alarm can come at any hour. The craftsmen work constantly. The smith repairs weapons and forges crossbow bolts. The fletchers make arrows by the thousand. The carpenters patch roofs smashed by trebuchet stones and build hoardings. The timber galleries hung out from the battlements so defenders can drop stones straight down on anyone at the wall's foot. Water is rationed and guarded. Food is issued by the book. The animals dwindle in their careful order, and the smell of the castle changes as the months pass. Hundreds of people and their remaining beasts packed inside stone walls, with limited water for washing and the latrines discharging where they always have, produce an atmosphere the chronicles politely decline to describe. Morale is a resource as real as grain, and it is managed. The chaplain says Mass and frames the ordeal as a trial sent by God. The lord and lady show themselves on the walls, share the rations, praise the watch. Rumours are the enemy within. Rumour that relief is coming. Rumour that it is not. Rumour that the well is failing. Rumour that someone is hoarding food, and the Castellan punishes hoarders and defeatists severely, because panic can take a castle faster than any trebuchet. And there are the sallies, sudden, planned eruptions of the garrison from a postern gate, knights bursting out at dawn to burn a siege engine or spike the enemy's works, then racing back inside before the camp can respond. A successful sally is worth weeks of morale. A failed one is a disaster. Dead men the castle cannot replace, because the defender's cruelest constraint is that every loss is permanent. The attackers can recruit, the besieged can only subtract. Then the real enemies arrive, and they do not carry ladders. They are hunger, thirst, and disease, and they besiege both sides at once. By the middle months, the castle's arithmetic is biting. Rations are cut, then cut again. The bread grows darker and stranger as the good wheat gives out, and the flour is stretched with barley, beans, bran, and worse. The last animals go under the knife, and then the chronicles record the escalation that every long siege knows. The horses are eaten, then the dogs, then the cats, and in the truly desperate sieges, rats, leather boiled soft, and the grass growing between the stones. Accounts of the worst sieges in history record prices for a dead rat, and things darker still that the chroniclers set down with horror. Hunger brings its diseases. Scurvy loosens teeth, wounds refuse to heal, and starving bodies fall to every fever that passes. In the packed, filthy conditions, dysentery, the bloody flux, becomes the great killer, sweeping through garrison and refugees alike. In siege after siege in history, disease killed far more people than combat ever did. And here is the strange mercy of it. The besiegers are often dying too. Their camp is just as crowded and filthy, their supply lines strain to feed thousands of men in a stripped countryside through the seasons, and epidemics rip through siege camps so reliably that many sieges ended not with a fall or a relief, but with the attacking army simply melting away, dead, sick, deserted or recalled. Winter is the attacker's enemy more than the defenders. The garrison has walls and roofs and stacked firewood, while the besiegers shiver in tents in the mud. So the year turns, and the whole siege becomes a single brutal race. Which side's suffering breaks first, the hunger inside the walls, or the disease, cold, and money outside them? And hanging over everything, month after month, is the question of the ending, because medieval sieges ended according to rules, and everyone inside knows them by heart. The conventions of war in this age are stark. A garrison that surrenders on terms, negotiating while it still has strength, can expect mercy. The defenders march out, sometimes with honours, lives, and sometimes property spared. But a castle or town that refuses terms and is then taken by storm forfeits everything. By the accepted customs of the age, a place that falls to assault can be given over to sack, and the chronicles of stormed towns and castles are among the darkest pages of the entire medieval record. Everyone inside the walls knows this. It is the mathematics behind every council of war in the Great Hall. Hold out and pray for relief, or treat while terms can still be had. So the endgame takes its familiar forms. Sometimes a relief army appears on the horizon, and the siege breaks in a day of battle and rejoicing. Sometimes the attacker's mine brings a tower down, the breach is stormed, and the end is swift and terrible. Sometimes treachery does it. A bribed guard, a postern opened at night, for gold has opened more gates than any trebuchet. But most often, it ends with parley. A conditional surrender is agreed, with a date. If no relief arrives by such a day, the castle will yield on terms, and hostages are exchanged to seal it. And on the appointed morning, if no banners have appeared on the horizon, the garrison, gaunt, sick, and half-starved, unbars the gates it closed a year ago and marches out between the ranks of its enemies, carrying what the terms allow, leaving the empty stores, the exhausted well, and the graves. They have not been defeated by any warrior. They have been defeated by arithmetic, by the last barrel of grain, by the steward's book, by the equation that was written on the day the gates closed. That was a year inside a castle under siege, and it is a story the movies have never really told. Not a tale of ladders and sword fights, but of arithmetic and endurance. The cellars packed with grain and barrels, the deep well guarded like a relic, the animals slaughtered in careful order, the rations written in the steward's book. The slow duel of the machines, trebuchet stones grinding the battlements, carcasses hurled over the walls, miners and counterminers knife fighting in the black tunnels beneath the towers, the long discipline of the middle months, the watches, the Fletchers, the rumours, the sallies at dawn, and then the true enemies, hunger, thirst, and the bloody flux, besieging both sides at once, killing more surely than any assault, until the whole war became a race between the starvation inside the walls and the disease and cold outside them. And over it all, the hard rules everyone knew. Terms and mercy for those who yielded in time, sack and horror for those taken by storm, and the final parley, the appointed morning, the empty horizon, and the gates opening at last from the inside. The castles still stand across Europe, romantic ruins on their crags, and we walk their wall walks taking photographs. But stand in one of their cellars sometime, in the cool dark where the barrels once were, and understand what that room truly was. It was the castle's real armoury. The deepest truth of medieval war is that the greatest fortresses were not defeated by heroes. They were defeated by the day the food ran out. Stone can stop an army. Nothing stops arithmetic.